From the kitchen of the cabin and around the world, this is Voices from the Solitude, a podcast about the coronavirus and gaming. Today I'm speaking to Max Davie, physician and gamer, about what the coronavirus is and what we can do to combat it. So I'm here with renowned physician and expert on screens and person who in no way is on the Apple payroll, Max Davie. Max, how are you?
Hello, I'm all right.
And so, I just, to begin, how are you coping? So before we started recording, you said that you were, self-isolating for the week because you got a cough or something. How is it going for you? You're coming out of it soon. How have you coped?
Yeah, we've all been doing it together. The whole family's been doing it. So it's actually been we've sort of been in it together. We've kind of planned for it because we all got symptoms around the same time. So we said, right, we're just going to do everyone. We've all been in the house. We've kind of worked out a bit of a structure and played a reasonable number of games. Fortunately, we all variably enjoy games, so we've actually been able to have quite a lot of fun, really.
Great. And before we come back to that element, first of all, I'd like to sort of leverage your knowledge as a professional. So to begin, could you tell us what the coronavirus and COVID-19 actually is?
Well, it's a novel mutation of a form of respiratory virus which has been around for a very long time. Coronaviruses have always been part of the set of viruses that seasonally come around and cause colds and flu and flu-like symptoms and so forth. This is one that's just a mutation has emerged that is particularly unpleasant and leads, particularly in older people, to a high risk of death. It's also seems to be reasonably contagious. Not the most contagious agent we've ever seen, but it's got that combination of being a bit more contagious than the deadly conditions that we know, and a bit more deadly than the very contagious ones. So it's in that kind of area where it's that nasty combination, and also of being contagious before you have symptoms necessarily, and there's a possibility of kind of carrying it when you don't have any symptoms, which is one way that it's spreading very rapidly.
And so, sort of, what's the origin of the disease, and I guess for lay people, how often do we see in sort of populations new viruses like this cropping up? Is this a regular occurrence, and is it just as you say, the combination of sort of virulency and contagiousness that has made this one so important?
Yeah, I think it is this combination of virulence and contagious and how quickly it spreads. But the emergence of new strains and new viruses is an absolutely regular thing. We've had swine flu, we've had SARS, we've had all of these things. But even within very familiar viruses like the influenza virus, every year is a different strain. And the flu vaccine that many of us are advised to have is a different vaccine every year based on what changes in the virus they anticipate that year. So change is the only constant when it comes to viruses. But this is just a particularly unpleasant and dramatic change.
And so, how important is this? Because I ended up, interestingly, having quite a heated text argument with someone in my group who was saying that the World Health Organization and governments are just conspiring to divide us and tear us apart, and there was no disease and it's all bullshit. But how important is it for us to abide by the guidelines that we've been given?
I think I need to make this absolutely crystal clear. It is of paramount importance that people abide by the guidelines. The modelling for the impact of not doing anything is quite astonishingly terrifying. But I think, talking from a UK context, because that's where I've seen the modelling, it is absolutely essential that everyone follows as far as absolutely possible the guidelines, that their governments have laid down. And most governments are more or less producing very similar guidelines at this point. So I know that you have listeners in various countries, but it's very, very similar. It's the social distancing and it's the self-isolation if you have any symptoms at all. The idea is at this point, certainly in the UK, is to suppress transmission so that each case, each person eventually passes on the virus to less than one person, so the number of cases goes down. But at this point, we are in an exponential phase of infection, where it's very clear that each case is passing on to multiple people. So the sort of doubling time of cases is only a few days, and that's a very bad place to be in. So it's absolutely essential that everybody follows stringently the guidance which has come out of government.
And if people if people get symptoms, so I guess this is a two-part question. Firstly, if people get symptoms, what should they do? Should they go to their doctor? Should they go to their hospital?
If you have symptoms, you should immediately self-isolate. And actually, if you're not unwell with symptoms, you can simply just self-isolate, go to the NHS website and follow the guidance on self-isolation for 14 days if you live in a household, or 7 days if you live alone. If you become more unwell, then you can contact the NHS 111 service and they will give you advice on what to do. But contacting your GP is almost certainly not the right thing to do, because a lot of general practitioners in the UK are not offering appointments in person, and NHS 111 have all the data and have all the information. And if you really do need hospital treatment, then they can arrange that for you. So it's very clear on the NHS website what the guidance is.
And so what is your situation with regards to work? As a doctor, are you on the front line, or will you be working from home? How does this affect your day-to-day?
So, well, it's very much affected our day-to-day. So I work primarily in a community service, looking after and diagnosing children with autism and ADHD and other developmental problems. It's the main effect it's had at the moment is that almost all of our work has become remote. And we can do quite a lot of it remotely, but there is a limited amount you can do in terms of assessment. But what I'm focusing on, I suppose, at the moment is trying to talk to families, talk to parents, and try and kind of give them some guidance and some kind of sense that things are moving forward. We're very worried about children with additional needs being cooped up with families, often quite vulnerable families, and we're sort of trying to kind of put things in place to support them. But moving forward, personally, it seems more and more people who don't work in acute hospital medicine but are medically qualified are being pulled into the acute site, as essentially that gets overwhelmed with demand. And I think it's entirely possible in the next few weeks that that's something that I will have to do as well.
And so, are there symptoms that people get at this time of year that definitely aren't coronavirus? If they get certain symptoms, are they, to sort of lessen anxiety, I guess?
I think there's a lot going around social media and so forth saying if you have this symptom, you do not have coronavirus, and that's absolute nonsense. The guidance is very clear. If you have a persistent a new continuous cough or a fever, you have to place yourself in the possible case class, and you have to self-isolate. There is no two ways about it. There's no ambiguity. And if can say, oh well, I've got a rash, so it's definitely not coronavirus, we just don't know. That's why the guidance is as simple as it is, that if you have those symptoms, you self-isolate, and there is no exceptions to that.
So all the things where people say, if you get snot, if you get sneezes,
yeah,
this is untrue.
Yeah, it's absolutely untrue, and it's quite dangerous.
So moving on then, you're someone who interests themselves in mental health, and at the moment people are having to. So I'm working from home. I'm barely leaving the flat, and a lot of people are in a similar situation. Sort of, what tips can you give people to sort of keep themselves sane, and how much do you think gaming helps?
So I think there's two questions really there, isn't there? I mean, in terms of kind of maintaining your mental health, there's a few things that I think are important. A routine is important to an extent. So I think you sort of there are lots of people actually posting quite helpful things who have actually had lived a life like this for a long time for various reasons of relative isolation. So and one of the things that always comes through is the importance of routine, the importance of sleep, of getting to bed roughly the same time and getting up every morning and getting dressed and having your breakfast and all of those sorts of things that you would normally do if you were somebody who went out to work, you should continue to do. But also social contact remains important, and we should continue to sort of reach out to each other. And it's amazing really that this has come at a time where we have this amazing technology in order to do that. We should make full use of that. Sort of the transition to the number of things that we've now been able to do remotely that we would never have dreamed of doing 5 years ago is quite amazing. Like, lectures and support groups and kind of teaching by remote is amazing, and we should carry on doing it if at all possible. um, I think I think within that, gaming is important, but I think gaming is important because fun is important. If you're in that sort of situation, things that you enjoy, I'm a bit wary of sort of saying, oh, board games are uniquely good, whereas doing something else that you enjoy, like playing a video game or just running around in the garden and making fart noises, is not good, because it is just about the thing that you enjoy. Now, I really enjoy board gaming, and that's great, and we all have a good time with that. But I think it's just about finding some time in a stressful situation to enjoy yourself, however that works for you.
And so, broadening this out, sort of, again, with your professional hat on, what effect is this currently having on the NHS in England? And what do you think the effects will be down the line?
I mean, I think the NHS, it's very much depends if people pull their fingers out and actually do the social distancing. It's a bit disturbing that there's still people kind of arranging social engagements and going on holiday and visiting places. It really does need to be much more stringently observed. But it could be absolutely devastating. I mean, the projections of how many critical care beds and intensive care beds are going to be needed if the social distancing doesn't work is several times more what is actually available. And that simply means that people who need intensive care will not have access to an intensive care bed. And that may happen in the next couple of weeks. So it's very, very serious. I mean, down the line, I think this is a virus that will join the various viruses that come round every so often. So this is a long-term project trying to get the epidemic under control. But after that, then there will be kind of outbreaks, and there will be a need for monitoring and a kind of a public health response. Eventually, a vaccine is definitely possible, but again, it will just continue to be a bit of a running sore. To put a slightly positive spin on it, at the end of at the end of this, the NHS will probably emerge more efficient and stronger. Certainly politically, it's the support that the NHS has been for the NHS is being reinforced in Britain, and I think actually the NHS will in some ways benefit from the need to be efficient in this situation, the need to remove barriers and work together. That will possibly be a silver lining in the long run. We've certainly seen a lot of changes that we've been looking for a long time suddenly being rushed through. So we'll see.
And so, I probably should have asked this earlier, but it's just occurred to me. What is the kind of life cycle of a virus like this in the sense of, it comes up, there's a pandemic, and then treatment is found, and vaccines are found. I mean, we're seeing a lot about sort of the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and that's not a factor now. What is the sort of life cycle and the way we deal with these kind of things?
Well, it's partly us dealing with it, and it's partly just a building up of immunity within the population. We don't know. Typically, if you've had a virus, you tend to be more immune to it if you're then exposed to it. So actually there builds up in the community and in the population a kind of overall immunity, which is going to be relatively protective. But we don't know how this one's going to behave. We think that once you've had it, you can't get it again. But there are reports to the contrary, so we're going to have to see how that goes. So vaccination and medical care is important, but actually, ultimately, there's always a process where this. If you look at, for instance, the arrival of smallpox into the Americas with the conquistadors from Europe, that was a non-immune population. It was absolutely devastating. Had they been exposed to it more slowly over time, it would have been less devastating. And the difficulty at the moment is that there's a huge number of totally non-immune people being exposed to this agent, which is virulent and highly contagious.
And so, to end then, if you could sort of boil down how we should proceed and what our sort of responsibilities are as citizens, and sort of, with living with fellow people, what would you boil down to the things we can do in the coming months?
You can stay at home. You can stay at home and keep your distance and follow the government advice as it evolves. That is very simple.
Brilliant. Well, Max Davie, thank you ever so much.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
If you want to support content like this, you can go to patreon.com/5G4D. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and if you can, stay at home.